Imagine walking into your favorite store only to find that everyday items from groceries to electronics have suddenly spiked in price. But what if the reason behind this isn't just inflation or supply chain hiccups, but a deliberate policy decision? Today, we're diving into the world of tariffs, those taxes on imports you've probably heard about but maybe never fully understood.
Tariffs.
Expensive tariffs. Tariffs.
Specifically, the tariffs recently imposed by President Trump on Canada, Mexico, and China.
To me, the most beautiful word in the dictionary is tariff.
I do like tariffs.
Tariff.
Tremendous tariffs. Tariffs that are massive.
We will tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens.
What were these tariffs designed to do? Who's paying the real price, you or the big corporations? And how might they be quietly reshaping your wallet, your job, and even your dinner table? Stick around because I'm unpacking the hidden costs of these trade wars and how they could be hitting closer to home than you think. If you've been paying attention, then you know that the huge news in the US this week are new tariffs imposed by the Trump administration on a number of different countries. Now, President Trump has threatened these tariffs previously in his administration and has not gone through with them. But today, as of March 4th, these tariffs are all in place. Now, the list of tariffs that went into effect on March 4th include 25% tariff on Canada, 25% tariff on Mexico, and an additional 10% tariff on Chinese goods. Now, to start this conversation, I thought it was important to actually understand the intent behind these tariffs. The Trump administration strongly believes that these tariffs should be in effect until illegal immigration and fentanyl stop coming across the U.S. borders. He's also imposing tariffs on China in response to intellectual property theft, forced technology transfer, and quote-unquote, other unreasonable behavior. Now, before we get too far into the weeds with this entire tariff topic, I just wanted to preface this all by saying that I'm not personally going to be speaking on my own opinion on the tariffs or how I feel about any of this. The goal of this video is to focus on the financial effect that this is going to have on the American people. I want to make sure that my audience is as informed as possible about all of this so that you can all make educated decisions for yourself without the influence of my opinion. Further, from the White House fact sheet, we can see that in 2023, the U.S. trade deficit in goods was the world's largest at over $1 trillion, essentially meaning that we have been importing far more goods than we've been exporting. Now, of course, the market has not taken kindly to this tariff news and is tumbling every time new tariffs are announced. Now, the Dow fell about 650 points yesterday on March 3rd after Trump confirmed the tariffs, and the NASDAQ slid 2.6%. And that's largely because of the impact that investors expect these tariffs to have on the market in general and the cost of goods. In fact, there's a new article out from GDP Now stating that the first quarter of 2025 is on track for a negative 2.8% GDP growth, meaning that consumers are spending significantly less and exports were far weaker than expected. Now, from a personal perspective, the American people are bracing to essentially see how much this is really going to affect the cost of goods, how far their paycheck will go when people are already feeling squeezed, and whether or not people will have to dig into their savings account just to get by. So to get a better feel for that, I thought it could be helpful to pop up a list of things that we import from all three of these countries and things that could be affected in price. For Mexico, the top of mind category are food and beverages. So the US gets about 63% of their vegetable imports and 47% of their fruit and nut imports from Mexico. You know the jingle about avocados from Mexico? In fact, they're the largest single source of horticultural imports to the US. So there's no doubt that if we weren't already paying higher prices at the grocery store, we definitely will be now. And the unfortunate part is that it's obviously going to drive up the price of healthier, fresh foods, forcing a lot of Americans to settle for more processed and unhealthy options. And in terms of beverages, of course, there are some very famous breweries out of Mexico, Corona and Dos Equis. So if you enjoy those brands, expect to pay more for those as well. The second category here is vehicles and car parts. So about 16 out of every 100 cars sold in the US is actually manufactured in Mexico. General Motors, Ford, Nissan, FCA Mexico, Volkswagen, Kia, Mazda, Toyota, Audi, and Honda have all been producing and building cars in Mexico for years. Car prices are already at near record highs, with a typical new car costing somewhere around $50,000. So these tariffs are going to drive up the price of cars by quite an additional margin, meaning that the automobile sector is going to be particularly hard hit with all of these tariffs. Now, in addition to driving up the price of new cars, this is also going to drive up the cost of simply getting your car fixed if your car falls under any of those brands I previously mentioned. And that's because a lot of the parts associated with those brands are manufactured in Mexico. Now, this is also true for tractor and tractor supply companies, which could yet again impact our own farming community and further drive up the cost of groceries. The next category this is going to impact is electronics and appliances. So many of our electronics, think laptops, desktop computers, monitors, and cell phones, come from Mexico. Petroleum and gas. Mexico exports 48% of its oil directly to the United States, accounting for more than 210 million barrels each year, meaning that we're likely going to see a significant price hike at the pump as well. One news outlet even reported a surge of up to 15 cents per gallon very quickly after the tariffs are imposed. The next category are medical instruments. This is a niche one, but Mexico is a major supplier of medical equipment to the United States. Think basic PPE like surgical gloves, masks, catheters, and much more dire items like pacemakers, dialysis machines, artificial joints like for hip and knee replacements, and even life-saving defibrillators. And unfortunately, if healthcare companies are having to pay significantly more to obtain those items, that cost will likely be passed on to the consumer, aka you and me. The next category are plastics. So interestingly enough, Mexico is the top supplier of plastic products to the US, Canada is the second, and of course, China is our third plastic supplier. So think about all the things that you use plastic for on a daily basis, all of the things that come packaged in plastic, and expect those prices again to increase. The final category here are gems and precious metals. So the US gets about 3% of the US supply from Mexico and another 14.5% from China. So expect metals and jewelry to cost more as well. Now moving on to Canada. So electricity. Canada actually supplies about 90% of the US's annual electricity imports. In fact, Doug Ford, who is the Ontario Premier, said he's ready to cut off electricity exports to the US if and when these tariffs by President Trump are imposed. The next category is machinery and transport. So the US imports about 7% of all cars and car parts from Canada. Companies like Ford, Honda, Stellantis, General Motors, Lexus, Toyota, Chevy, Lincoln, and more all manufacture cars in Canada that are then sold in the United States. So again, expect a significant surge in the cost of car prices and the cost to actually get your car fixed. The next category is fuel. The US imports about 6.5 million barrels of crude oil per day from Canada, making up about 60% of all crude oil imported into the United States. So again, this is more evidence that we are going to expect to feel this at the gas pump. Another category is manufactured goods, so electronics, vehicles, furniture, and toys. Another category is food and animals. The second to last are chemicals. And finally, beverages and tobacco, but not nearly to the scale that we saw from Mexico. And finally, products that we import from China. So the number one product here are electronics. So not surprisingly, the US imports tons of electronics from China to the tune of $127 billion in 2024. Think cell phones, laptops, computer parts in general. So definitely expect to pay a little bit more for your next laptop or your next cell phone. Other categories of products that we import from China include machinery, toys and games, plastics, as previously mentioned, furniture, iron and steel, medical devices, and apparel. So think about all of the items sold on Amazon, and I bet most of those items are actually manufactured in China. And if you've been watching my YouTube videos for a while, then you know that I'm a print-on-demand e-commerce seller. So this is greatly going to impact my businesses as well. I actually received an email this morning from Printify. We know that there's currently a Printify and Printful merger happening, but in this email, Printify basically came out and said that for the time being, they're going to hold their prices steady, meaning that they're not going to charge me as a seller any additional at the moment to fulfill items. So if I'm fulfilling a t-shirt or a coffee mug or something like that, that they are getting from China or any of these other countries, they're not going to charge me more for that at the moment. But if these tariffs do remain in place, they're likely going to have to increase their prices, meaning that my profit margin is going to be affected, or I'm going to have to price my items for sale higher. And the other news out today is that a lot of these countries are issuing retaliatory tariffs or retaliatory import taxes. So tariffs on tens of billions of dollars worth of product imported from the United States. And of course, people are really panicking. We can tell because the market is down day over day. And the fear here is that people are really worried about an all-out trade war. Now, in addition to these tariffs being implemented, we've also seen a huge rise in layoffs and furloughs because of the new Department of Government Efficiency. Now, I've personally had quite a number of friends and family members affected by this. So not only are quite a few people losing their jobs, but now all of the American people are coming to terms with the fact that we're likely going to have to pay significantly more for the cost of goods. And unfortunately, the combination of those two things means that the American people are likely in for a world of hurt. Now, the only potential glimmer of hope that I currently see is that if things continue how they currently are, the Fed may decide to cut rates a little bit earlier this year than they had initially anticipated. Now, of course, these findings are constantly changing. Even in the making and recording of this video, I had to make multiple edits and revisions because news outlets are constantly coming out with new information about retaliatory tariffs or conversations that President Trump is having with other world leaders. Now, I would love to know where all of you stand on this issue, so feel free to leave a comment down below. Let me know where you stand on this issue. Let me know how long you think these tariffs are going to be in place, and let me know what you think the true cost to the American people is going to be. As always, feel free to follow me on my social channels right here. Thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Before you go, if you could do me a huge favor and like this video if you want to see more content just like this, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you're notified every time I release a new video. That's all I have for today's video, so I'll see you in the next one. Bye.